raising the amount per acre from 4 cents to 10 cents. And further documentation to that extent. There's a copy of the resolution on page 134D.
Since we tabled this, we need to vote on this evening. We need a motion to approve an agreement with the Forestry Service.
So made.
I'll second it.
Any discussion? All in favor? Unanimous.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, the last item is consideration to approve a contract with the Georgia Department of Corrections, Lee State Prison, and the Board of Commissioners for an inmate detainee work detail. This is an annual contract that the board approves each year subject to funding. You did allocate funding in this year's budget for this purpose. I'd be glad to answer any questions the board may have. Under Commissioners' matters, the first item I'll defer to Commissioner Rowland.
The reason I come up with ask this right here about dumping once a month for Lee County citizens. We have a lot of people, probably not on the south and on the north, and we get a lot of illegal dumping. I just thought if we could let them once a month, like stoves, refrigerators, and such as that, make them break it down, get the rubber off, whatever, and get a recycling bin. Recycle the stuff they brought to us. I'm not talking about the home builders, I'm talking about the citizens of the county.
Residential.
Yeah, residential, just the or the farm or either one. But and Miss Betty said quarterly, we wouldn't be so proud of it if we did it quarterly. Still, some people don't come back. They probably don't want to hold that garbage for a month, for 3 months. We might get staggered by alphabetical order or something. Certain days, A through B show up or something. I mean, we're spending more money. My this truck going out and picking up garbage that people throwing out probably what it's going to cost us to dispose of it.
Any other comments?
I mean, I'd certainly like to look at the numbers and see how much money we'd be giving up. The other thing that I would suggest, if we do have a free day, that you have to prove that, number one, you pay a garbage bill, and number two, you pay it. It's paid. You couldn't be in the arrears on your garbage bill, and you could not be on any garbage bill list. I'd want some verification of that.
I agree with that. Any other?
Do you feel like that maybe a lot of that might be coming out of Sumter County?
I don't know. I can tell where it's coming from. It was so close to Leesburg. I don't think Mr. Skipper throws his washing machine out on the way down.
I think I'm insulted.
I think it's just one more demonstration of the need for additional code enforcement officers. And I think it's incumbent upon us to come up with a way to fund that through stiffer penalties for illegal dumping, for all the things that code enforcement does. I don't want it to be revenue driven, but I want it to be cost neutral, so that the people that are creating the problem are paying for the problem, as opposed to the people that are just good citizens taking care of doing the right thing.
Let me say one thing also. I have a serious concern driving through these subdivisions. People taking inert limbs, whatever, putting it on the right-of-way and burning it on the right-of-way. I've been talking to Chief Howell. I mean, they don't want to burn it in the backyard because they don't want to mess up their grass, but they put it on the right-of-way, leave the debris on the right-of-way, and it's getting to the point that if you drive through these subdivisions, the inert is getting to the point it's out of control. And we only got one code enforcement. We've only got the Lone Ranger. It's hard for him to go around this county, but he's been recently into down Kinchipuna Creek Road and Creekside Drive. The inert is tremendously piled as high as you can see, and they just leave it there. And lot of it's being burned on the right of way, and that's as the chief told me, you can't burn inert on the right of way. So we do have a problem. If you go in most subdivisions, you see this stacked up on the side of the road, and it doesn't look good. It detracts from our quality of life community.
Another code enforcement officer.
Without a doubt, if it's just a matter of time before we hire another code enforcement officer.
I think a lot of the areas where we have storm drainage, it gets down to those drains and creates a lot of problems.
Yep. But right now, Mr. Wright is busy how many hours a day, Bob could tell us, but it's getting worse. The burning of the inert on the right-of-way is getting out of control. And something needs to be done about it, because they won't burn it in their property, they want to put it on the right-of-way. And we're supposed to maintain the right-of-way, and it looks terrible. In some subdivisions, it looks real bad. So, it's a point taken. Dennis, it probably needs further discussion, but something needs to be done. Any other comments?
While we're talking about code enforcement,
Yes,
if I
sir.
could just put in a plug for Jim Wright. Jim is doing his annual event this weekend, this Saturday, Rivers Alive, and it's a phenomenal event. I'm sure he would, if he wanted to volunteer, he still has room for volunteers. But this is where volunteers go out, they clean up a section of the Flint River, a section of the Kitchafooney, and a section of the Muckalee, and they do a phenomenal job. It's a great service to our community, and just really appreciate what Jim Wright does, and all the people that volunteer for the Great American Cleanup, which is a land-based cleanup, and Rivers Alive, which is a water-based cleanup. Just want to thank Jim Wright for his service.
Appreciate it. And also, there's another problem. I think Mr. Wright has over 100 volunteers for this cleanup, and they lack quite a few canoes. We had
I think Jim is getting the canoes together. In fact, he's going up to Americas to get some more canoes, but I think he's got that handled.
Well, I think when I spoke to him today briefly, I think he only had 15 canoes. So if you've got 100 people, Bob, we're going to have to find some more canoes to complete the program. So that's the reason I brought it up. But if he has a problem, we just need to see if we can help him get these people to volunteer canoes for the cleanup. Any other comments?
Mr. Chairman, the last item under Commissioners' Matters is a special request from Peachtree Housing Partners. And they're represented tonight, and I'd like to call Mr. Thompson to come forward and present his request to you in person. This is regarding the senior housing project that you voted on recently.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Since I was last in front of you, for the resolution for 78 units for seniors on Forester Road, we have talked to our market study folks, and they've done further investigative work and come to the conclusion that the most we could build was 60 under DCA's new guidelines. When we originally planned 78, we were looking at the 2009 guidelines that the Department of Community Affairs had put out. The market study guidelines were the last item that they posted for us for this year's tax credit allocation round. And they changed it drastically. The reasonings behind the change were they're trying to get as conservative as possible so that they get deals or developments that are the least risky developments. So they're encouraging us to build smaller deals so that it'll require less demand to fill those units. On top of that's a threshold requirement. So if I go above 30% of capture rate, as far as my demand is X, if I need to capture over 30% of that demand, then I can't do the deal. On top of that, they've added scoring points. It's a competitive process where I'm competing, or my company is competing with developments, whether they're in Americus or Columbus or Albany or wherever they might be. It's all point driven. So I get certain points for locating in certain areas and building a certain type of product. So this year they've added market points, and that means while they may require me to be at least 30% of capture rate or below, they're going to encouraged me through the points to be at 20% or below. So the further I drop my units, the more points I'm going to get on my application, and at the end of the day, the more likely it is that I actually receive an allocation and can actually develop the product. We feel we have a good scoring deal at the end of the day, but I'd rather give up 10 more units, or I'd rather give up the profit that goes with those 10 units to ensure that I get the deal, because I'd rather have 10% less and actually have the deal for me, for profits, and for Lee County to actually have the quality affordable units in service. So today I'm asking for a second resolution, this resolution to say that the county supports the development of 50 units rather than the original 78 that I had hoped to develop.
Well, we passed the 78 unit resolution, but I think I've been informed that you need this resolution very quickly in order to submit it to the Georgia Department of Community Affairs.
Yes, sir. The tax credit application deadline is at 4 o'clock a week from this Thursday, July 22nd. And if I turn it a minute late, then I did all the work for nothing, because I can't turn it in.
Well, we'll have to, Mr. Alves, we'll have to vote on this evening in order for him to proceed with his plan. And all we need to do is make.
Could I ask you a question?
Of course.
Are you planning on any substantial changes to your management team or on-premise employees?
No, all of that stays the same. The operating expenses that we have budgeted are higher than I think they'll end up being anyway. All of that stays the same with a full-time manager, full-time maintenance person. The only change will be the layout. The community amenities, all of that's still going to be the same, except the green space will be increased, the buffers will be increased, and then the distance on our walking path that'll kind of meander through our open spaces and green spaces, that'll increase as well. So if anything, it's going to make it easier for me to make it nicer and for the community in general, and then my actual development as well.
Josh, eventually could you add units to this complex?
Well, we're going to try to stay on the same 10 acres. So once I put it into the partnership to develop it, I can't pull any of that out.
Okay.
And a lot of what we're doing is when we tell Earthcraft and the department, Earthcraft is a group that we'll work with for sustainability and green space. And when we work with them, they're actually going to place a deed restriction on the property that says, I'll certify you as Earthcraft, but you got to keep it green, you got to keep it open. So I can't go back in and tear down those trees and tear down that green space and add more units.
Are these units going to be the same size?
Actually, I think we've increased the size a little bit from what we were planning on by at least, I think, 20 or 40 feet a unit, just because we have more room to work with. So my footprint can be a little larger than it was before and still add the open space.
The rent's going to stay the same?
Yes, they're still, I think the latest models we have ran are even lower than we were planning on 2 months ago. So we sharpened our pencils and got those down.
One last question. When you first come to the proposal, you showed how much taxes, how much impact fees, how much sewage taps and all of that. You refigured that and determined what the difference is going to be?
Obviously, it will be lower, but it'll be the same on a per unit basis. So where I believe the water and sewer tap fees together with the meter fees about $4,600. 4,600 times 50 units is I can't do math quickly in my head, but it's over 200 grand. It's not the 400 grand that we'd hoped for with the close to 80 units, but everything will be the same on a per unit basis as far as taxes and water, sewer, and tap fees and building permits, etc.
When will they make the decision, John?
We had a meeting 2 weeks ago, and they're hoping to get the allocations out by Thanksgiving. They promised it to us by the end of the year, but they said they would like to. The team would like to enjoy their holiday, so they want to get it out before Thanksgiving. So we're hopeful of that.
Well, actually, y'all not sure if y'all can build this thing yet if the state don't approve. Is that what you're saying?
That's correct. If they don't approve, then we can't make the numbers work for an affordable senior deal. But we feel like with all the research we've done, with lowering the number of units to pick up these additional points, we're very confident that